Good evening. We are live here in the Orlando Sentinel newsroom for the primary election results. Lots of stuff coming in fast. We already know the results of a bunch of key races. Scott Maxwell's here. You've got a lot of stuff going on tonight, Scott. But first, why don't you start out by telling us about the big upset of the night so far?
Yeah, the big upset so far looks to be Jeff Ashton, the incumbent state attorney best known for leading the Casey Anthony prosecution. 4 years ago, he burst onto the scene and ousted a longtime prosecutor in Lawson Lamar. Jeff Ashton appears to have been going down tonight big time.
Yeah.
We're talking, it looks like about a 13-point lead, and the name that Central Floridians are going to need to get to know is Aramis Ayalis. She is anyway, she is the one who beat him. Look.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I don't know how many voters could tell you her name, but I bet you that they could tell you the name of George Soros, who we know is put a lot of money into this race.
Yeah, and that was it was really fascinating, and I think it caught a lot of people, I'll certainly include myself, by surprise, because it was odd in that George Soros is known for dumping big money into beating back Republicans. In this case, Jeff Ashton is a Democrat.
Is a Democrat. This was a Democratic primary.
Right, but it has been said that one of his sort of hallmarks is to help black female prosecutors, one or both, who are Democrats, and Jeff Ashton, I guess he was a moderate, but anyway, he was not a black and female, and so he brought about $1 million, which is a giant amount of money here. And I have to give credit to that campaign, to the Alice campaign. It looks like they ran a pretty super targeted campaign, and there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking to figure out what went wrong. But apparently that message, by the way, was very heavily race baited in my estimation.
It absolutely was. I mean, I looked at a number of the TV ads in that race, and that was the theme. What do you think resonated with voters? Do you think it was this message of possible discrimination in terms of how people are treated in the justice system? Or do you think it were some of these, chips Ashton took over the years with, he had a couple, little
Ashley
scandals.
Madison is what you're thinking.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be, I've been
there
trying
was
to...
that. There was the guy in his office who I think he eventually fired, So.
He had an assistant prosecutor who's posted very vulgar, racist stuff. Didn't fire him the first time, but did ultimately do so. But had Ashley Madison go on. It looks like there's a bunch of pieces that come together. But yes, the Ayalis campaign was really all about racial discrimination.
Yeah.
It flat out made the case that Jeff Ashton was going to lock up, that was what she showed, lock up black people and let white people go free. She wasn't subtle. I'd submit she didn't have much in the way of facts to back, didn't have much, but it appears that resonated, and we probably can't underestimate what kind of grassroots, ground level campaign they did. They also played games, as we know, closing the primary here. In this race, if you're a Republican or an independent in Orange or Osceola County, you will not ever get a chance to vote in this race, except for against a write-in blank, because Ayalis's team had Bill Vose, a former guy who really disliked Jeff Ashton, come in and file as a write-in, which closes the primary. So the campaign operated pretty tactically, pretty smart, it looks like.
Yeah. So it looks like that's the way that one's headed for tonight. And we'll have the final numbers on that, I'm sure, in just a bit. All right, so we got a bunch of other stuff to get to here, Scott. Should we just start going down the ballot?
Yeah, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on each of them. We can start with the U.S. Senate race, which didn't turn out to be much of a surprise. It was billed as a barn burner at the beginning of the year, but Marco Rubio for the Republicans and Patrick Murphy for the Democrats cruised. I mean, we're talking upwards of 60% against big fields.
Yeah.
Right now, to show you how far Alan Grayson has fallen, the Democratic firebrand from Orlando, he is struggling to cut him ahead of Pam Keith, and the falling behind Patrick Murphy.
Possibly third in his race, which is not something a lot of folks would have predicted a couple months ago.
No, so you're going to have a Murphy-Rubio race in November. That's actually my column for tomorrow. You can check. Actually, it's online right now.
Yeah,
you can
it's
check
already
that
up.
out
It's already up. You're quick,
but
Scott.
you are going. Folks are going to be bombarded with ads over the next 2 months for those two. Yeah.
And what do you think is going to be the main issue in that race? I found it interesting that after Marco Rubio said he just absolutely would not run again for the Senate, he then did, and after denouncing Donald Trump in the presidential primary, he seemed to be most recently in a contest with Baruf over who liked Trump more.
Marco Rubio is going to have trouble with Donald Trump as baggage. If Trump's numbers go up in the polls, maybe okay. But right now he's trying to walk this fine wire, and and that's going to be a challenge. You're right. He flip-flopped. In Marco Rubio's own words, he claimed that he had promised. He said, "quote 10,000 times." He would not run for re-election, and then he did.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of Trump connecting. There's going to be a lot of flip-flopping accusations against Rubio. I'm going to say they'll all be fair. On the flip side, Rubio's people are going to be hitting Murphy for being inflating his credentials, for being a privileged boy father, whose father was responsible for much of his success, and some of that will be true as well. So it's going to be ugly, and this will be one of the swing. There's only a handful of Senate seats that actually control the Senate and are in play, and will be one of them.
All right. So again, those races have already been called, and that stuff's pretty well set. I want to pivot, if we can, here to a statewide amendment on solar energy.
You tell us about that one. You've been
so
following that.
This one appears to have also won in a landslide. It needed 60% of the vote to pass. It seems to have gotten well over 70% at this point. So very simply, this amendment would extend tax breaks to business owners that want to put rooftop solar on their roofs, and it had wide support. I think it's no surprise that it passed. But I do think too, Scott, and I don't know about you, but I feel like there's so much going on with solar right now.
Yeah.
This was about more than just this amendment. I think this was a bit of a referendum from the people in Florida who are saying we want more clean energy. We want solar. We want to see that become part of our daily lives.
And you're right. If I haven't looked at the numbers most recently, if it's 70%, is that what you said?
Yeah.
I mean, that's giant.
And we can check the numbers for sure
That's
here. But
that's giant. Fair districts, which is another over.
So they're at almost 73%.
That's it. Doesn't get much bigger than that. You will
Sure.
not find individuals, for instance, that get elected with that sort of margin.
No.
So that's a big deal. And I would say clean energy is probably the mandate there.
Absolutely. So there's going to be another solar amendment on the ballot in November. You can watch my column for some details on that coming up very soon.
All right, I want to
So
move
let's get to our next races on the list here. What you got, Scott?
We're going to get there's two congressional races that were pretty big here in Central Florida. One is District 9, and that is where, Darren Soto, Dina Grayson, and Susanna Randolph were all running together.
Yeah, not a good night in the Grayson household.
No, not a good night in the Grayson household. However, we're skipping around right here. I'll go ahead and make this prediction right now. You can mark it down on your YouTube channel right here. Alan Grayson, his wife, lost
We're
the
on
seat.
Facebook Live.
And I think we're everywhere.
We're
right
everywhere.
now,
Okay.
I would not be surprised to see Alan Grayson go back in 2 years and try to run again. This guy does not like to go away.
Yeah.
He does not ever believe he was wrong. I think, if anything, he's probably convinced the voters got it wrong. So he may come back. But for right now, Darren Soto, the state senator, is the one who, as you can see there, 36% over Dina Grayson, who got that last name just in time for the election. Susanna Randolph, who was a long time viewed as the sort of the progressive. Well, she was the hardcore long-term progressive who worked for Grayson. Ended up coming in third place there. But the other big race is right here in Orlando, the eccentric race, and that is Val Demings, former OPD police chief, really cleaned up in District 10, getting 54% of the vote over Geraldine Thompson and Bob Poe, who a lot of viewers probably saw on TV. He pumped a lot of money into anti-gun. Bob Poe ends up with only 17%, so that's probably a pretty strong thing. And we should mention one thing right here, Beth. Odds are the two people we just mentioned, Darren Soto and Val Demings, they are probably your two next members of Congress, because these districts are now heavily Democratic. In fact, the Republicans didn't really spend much effort putting up candidates.
That's absolutely right. I think that's what we're probably going to see play out here over the next few months. Val Demings, had a huge amount of name recognition here. You might recall she started a run for county mayor, I believe, and ended up pulling out of that race, and now has had more success.
It looks like she found the one she was looking for after several tries. And there are so many, we don't have time to go through them all, but maybe we'll hit a couple things quick. I think there was a race too in Seminole you were looking at.
Yeah, so I want to get to some of the local races, because Scott, my thing is people know who they want to vote for president. They've already made up their minds. There's probably nothing me or you can say to convince people who to vote for president that they don't already think they know. But I would say that the local races are so important. These are the people who set most of your taxes, who decide what you pay on your sewer bill, who decide if you're going to have a splash pad in your neighborhood or a new bike trail. So I think this stuff is really important. And there are several school board races I think we should get to, both in Orange and Seminole. We have Dee Dee Schaefer trying to hang on to her seat on the Seminole County School Board. She is a longtime school board member in Seminole County, very well respected, but so far she's being edged out by Abby Sanchez, who is a teacher and who ran a very strong campaign, and that race has not been called yet, but that's going to be an interesting one to watch.
And that is a call for something different. Schaffner's been there for, I think, 20 years or something like that. And
Long
if you guys
time.
could pull the numbers back up, Sean, right above, not too far above that in Seminole with the, there you go. That's another big deal right there.
Absolutely.
I mean, okay, I'd argue the tax collector isn't that big of a deal to begin with. In fact,
Yeah.
I've advocated doing away with the elected position. But Ray Valdez has been in that position for, I think, 30 years. And
Yes.
this year, the Sentinel, I've written a couple of columns and we've written a couple of stories. He's really taken a lot of scrutiny, Ray Valdez, for mixing his private finances, trying to purchase tax liens and properties that were basically foreclosed upon or offered by way of his office.
Yeah, essentially personal profit off of the office itself,
Yeah.
which probably strikes many voters as a conflict.
And that was my contention all along. You want to make money off the office, fine. You want to serve the office, fine. Don't try to do both at the same time. Ray Valdez not only did that before, but he would not apologize for doing it, and he
right.
said he was going to keep on doing it. Well, the voters said, no, you won't. At least it looks like so far.
That's what it appears to be. It looks like that is quite possibly what has given his opponent the edge in that race.
It looks like it.
And, that's a name that's important. Ray Valdez has a lot of name recognition because we all know tax collector's the one you write the check to.
That's right.
And so that's an important position, and it looks like first time in a long time, new blood in that spot.
That's right. And before we leave Orange County, there's a few races that are interesting. There is most of the school board races were decided tonight, but there's one that's headed to a runoff. Christine Moore is the only incumbent on the school board. I think I have this right. Maybe we'll get the numbers up there. But the only incumbent who has not cruised to re-election. It looks like she's going to be going to November. Pam Gould, Kat Gordon both got re-election. Nancy Robinson didn't even have a challenge, but Christine Moore had a couple of challengers, and I think may have some ammunition against her, because if you look at the numbers, I don't know if we can get them up there, but that's a lot of anti-incumbent sentiment. There she is. So she's got 45%, which is strong, but that means 55% of the people decided they didn't want the person who's there. So that's interesting. And you may have, I think you were looking at some of the county commission races in Orange too.
In Orange as well. So, and let's see if we can get those up. The Orange County Commission races have been really interesting. There was an open seat in District 1. The incumbent wasn't part of it. The two kind of front runners, I guess you could say, were Betsy Vanderlei and Bobby Olszewski, and it looks like Vanderlei has edged out Olszewski. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. We're going to a runoff because nobody got the 50% plus
and
one.
that one was interesting.
So,
you're not to be blamed on the pronunciation of his last name. It's Olszewski.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's a hard
everybody
one.
mispronounces my name, so that's
true.
what she gets.
That's right,
Bobby.
Kassab. So,
right. There you go.
No, that one was interesting though, because Vanderlei got the mayor of Orange County to jump in and endorse her, which she doesn't always do, and it apparently gave her an edge, but not enough of an edge. That's going to be. And then we also have the race that I know you were following, because it's a lot of the development we've been writing about, Edwards, and we can both pronounce Edwards.
I can say Edwards. Yes, thank you.
So
so Ted Edwards, incumbent in the east section of Orange County, and that was a really hard-fought race. The guy who was making the most noise as a challenger in that race, at least that I saw, was Tim McKinney, who you see here, actually came in third.
Right.
So it looks like Edwards is heading into a runoff with Emily Bonilla, and I'm hoping I said Emily's name.
You nailed that.
All right, yes. So a runoff in that race, and the big driving factor in that race is absolutely, without question, development east of the Yukon River, and whether people want that or not. Now, how much that becomes a factor in the runoff, I think we'll see, but that is certainly what was galvanizing voters on the east side.
On the east side, and I think, because it's the same thing I just said about Christine Moore, 45% isn't bad, but when you're an incumbent,
yes,
people have had 4 years, actually in Ted Edwards' case, they've had 12 years because he ran and then went out to watch you, and that means the majority of the people in your district didn't want you back. Now, there's still a good chance he's going to win through this, but he's got some convincing to do, and you're right, it didn't have to do necessarily just because people at the east of the Yukon. I think it was more of a referendum on growth, that a lot of people viewed this as, are we going to have responsible growth in Orange County? And even if you lived in Winter Park, which wasn't going to technically be directed, you have concerns about sustainable growth, about smart growth, about transportation, and I think that's going to be a question that he has to answer a lot.
Absolutely, and I think, we saw the League of Women Voters and other civic organizations here in Orange County get very involved in that growth issue, and it really took on some legs. I expect that will continue to happen over the next couple months. The growth issue is a bit of an issue in some of these other districts as well. But I do want to point out here, we can get to turnout in a few minutes, but in that race especially, when we were talking to some of reporters, and I was talking to Steve Hudak, who covers Orange County, that race had huge turnout numbers. There were some precincts in that district, turnout was well over 30%, which is very, very high for a primary.
That's a great point, and maybe a decent ending point as we wrap things up, is that turnout overall today, really pretty sad. I think it was, I haven't seen the final numbers, but it was looking somewhere in the 18 to 20%. And for all the talk, for all the problems, like you said, people love to, we talk about
that's right.
Slacktivists. You like to go on your Facebook and maybe click. We love when you like us. Like us.
You should like us right now.
But you should also go check the boxes at the ballot and give votes that way.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Maybe do that in November, huh?
And however, I will say statewide, I think this is looking good for Florida. They were saying statewide, it looks like for a primary, highest turnout in a long time, higher than 2014, higher than 2012.
All right.
So that's a good thing for Florida, and I think Bill Cowles, the supervisor of elections here in Orange County, was saying highest turnout that he's seen in a primary too.
Right.
So.
And we will look to do something that good or much better come November, when Beth and I will be back to chat with you some more.
And I'm going to learn all the names.
For now, I'm Maxwell, and this is Kassab. We'll be back on election night in November.
Oh, wait. Before we go, Scott, I want to know, Kayla, did we get any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Let's see. Unfortunately, no.
We could have had a nice smooth sign-off. Instead, we have this awkward stumble like a drunk out of the bar. That's how we're going to leave you tonight.
That's how we're going to go out.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.